name of God. So he looked among his priests. And nobody there. No one among the clergy that could stand in the gap and do the job that needed to be done, that could stand between God's judgment and the sinful people in that city, that they might be spared, and judgment had to fall. God says, well, maybe if I look among the princes, verse 27, her princes, those who are the ruling class, those who are heads of families, clans, heads of state, heads of government, he's saying here, her princes in the midst thereof are like wolves ravening the prey. They look out, rather than looking out for the best interest of the people, they're like a pack of wolves that are going among them and ripping and tearing, not just to feed, but not just for the sport of it. I'm honestly, when I listen to this bunch in Washington, you know, maybe we ought to just kind of cut that part off and let it float out in the ocean somewhere. And all those guys, you got a chance this week to do something about that. Be sure that you get out in the polls and vote. Vote for somebody that is going to represent you and not go there to enrich and aggrandize themselves, not to feed their egos, not to try and force something on you that you have no desire for, no need for, like a bunch of wolves among the sheep. Her princes, the ruling class, those who should be looking after the folks. But he goes on to say, they not only destroy souls, but to get dishonest gain. They are out, and they're out for themselves. They're only interested in what they can get for themselves. The power. I think they like the power more than they like the money, but with the power they get the money. Isn't it interesting how that a person can go to Washington, D.C. to serve the people for a couple of years and draw that salary for the rest of their lives? I mean, you want to bring the debt down? Let them go back to work. Or maybe let them go to work. Some of them have never done a decent day's work in their whole lives. That didn't cost you anything extra. I'll get off my soapbox here and get back to preaching. So he looked among his priests, and he didn't find anything. He looked among the princes. He couldn't find anyone. He says, well, I'll look among my prophets. You know, sometimes God just puts his stamp on some young man, someone that, you know, maybe a gatherer of sycamore fruits, maybe following a plow like Elisha was when he was chosen to follow and take the place of Elijah. Maybe a shepherd as David was. But he puts his stamp on a man who will tell it like it is. I mean, will call sin sin, regardless of who it may offend. Not worried about tickling the fancies of the folks. You know, in many churches today, those who are the clergy were hatched out of some seminary somewhere. They couldn't find anything to do. They weren't suitable for anything else. So somebody said, maybe you ought to be in the ministry. And so they send him off to the seminary. He gets 6 or 8 years of theology training, and he gets out and he don't know which end is up. My experience I went to Bible college. You'd never know it, would you? I went to Bible college, and, you know, when I got out, the first thing I had to do was kind of unlearn a lot of the things that they taught me so that I could do it the way God wanted me to do it, the way the Word of God teaches me to do it. And I'm not bad-mouthing or demeaning the college, because they did the best job they could with what they had to do with. But God puts His stamp on those. You read them in the Old Testament. There's Amos. There's Habakkuk. There is Joel, and so forth. Jeremiah, the big prophets. You see, Ezekiel. But he looked among them, and here's what he had to say about his prophets. And her prophets have daubed them with untempered mortar, seeing vanity and divining lies unto them. Rather than exposing their sin, they were covering it up. I mean, a prophet is someone who tells forth what God would have them to say, the way God would have them to say it. And they're soft-pedaling. They're covering, it says, untempered mortar. Just cover it over. Rather than exposing the sin, they covered it. And then they were saying, this is what the Lord said. You ever watch religious TV? I try not to, but you get this guy comes on, you know, he's got the microphone. Little prop here. I mean, he dance a little jig and get it up here and this 5 things that God has given me. What chapter and what verse? 5 things that God has revealed to me. Well, I got a news bulletin. God has revealed Himself as much as He's going to reveal Himself in the Word of God, and if it's not in the book, don't pay any attention to it. They're saying God said when God hadn't said. They're quoting. Don't you hate it when somebody quotes you when you haven't said what they say you've said? I've had that happen a few times. I mean, someone came to me there one time and said, so-and-so said that you said thus and so. I said, well, I got a news bulletin for you. I've never said that in my life to anyone for any reason. Another person came to me and said that you said so-and-so. I said, I might have, because it sounds like something I would say. I don't recall it, but I can plead guilty to that one. Her priests violating the law, profaning the holy things, making no difference between the holy and the profane, making no difference in the day that God had given them to worship and to rest, made His Sabbaths, His holy days, holidays, the princes out for themselves, the prophets covering rather than exposing, lying about what God has said. Well, there's only one other place to look. Let's look among the people. Now, what kind of a chance do you think God has of finding someone that can do that big job, the big work, standing in the gap for Him? If He can't find them among the priests, the princes, or the prophets, where among the people is He going to find such a person? So He looked around heaven, and He heard the voice of one who volunteered and says, I'll go. I'll go stand in the gap, not for Jerusalem,